Hello guys, welcome back to WeeTalk Wrestling. I'm joined today by a very special guest. You might have seen this guy on YouTube at ScW Wrestling channel. I'm joined by none other than ScW Steve, mate. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I've been obviously following your channel since you started it, and it's amazing that we're doing a collab after, I suppose, what first meeting probably through OTM on a late Thursday evenings. We're two that obviously clearly don't have early mornings, but no, it's good to be on the channel and look forward to talking with you here today.
Yeah, but good. It's mental that we met for OTM, just one random Thursday night.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we
Absolutely.
have absolutely zero sleep between the both of us.
Probably not, no, but hey, that's part of it's part of enjoying, it's part of being a fan of professional wrestling, and obviously a lot of that being in the States as well. That's usually our time zones are kind of ruined, really, aren't we? Because we're not in the right area for it a lot of the time.
Yeah, but anyway, I want to sort of ask first of all, how did you sort of get into YouTube? Why did you want to start wrestling YouTube, especially?
So basically, it started about 2016 when I first got into it. I was watching some content creators on YouTube, and I would sort of talk to my best friend about it on FaceTime. He does a podcast now as well on YouTube, and at the time, he said to me, "Oh, you should really do like that sort of stuff. It's quite interesting. Like when we'd have our conversations, talk about fantasy booking, storylines, all the rest of it." So I sort of said to myself, "Okay." I sort of listened to his advice after 3 times. His name's James, and his channel's This Week in Metropolis, and yeah, he's always been someone that's been a big supporter of talking about wrestling. So sort of always been a big fan of the content I've put out as well. So yeah, I decided to give it a go. Tried to reach for the stars on YouTube, and yeah, I mean it's been a bit of a weird ride. At first, I kind of got lost in the lights of looking for views and stuff, but I think as the channel's sort of grown and as it's kind of gone over time, I've kind of learnt more what I've wanted to properly do with my channel, like the target audience I'm looking for, the type of content that I want to do. I don't want to be sort of chasing, breaking news stories at 4 o'clock in the morning, because again, we speak about the late nights. That's not healthy long term. You
Yeah.
start thinking, right, okay, I need a good night's sleep somewhere. So it's much more better like being from the UK, like next day is a lot of the time we find stuff out, we see shows. So let's sort of like just go with it the next day, go organically with what fits right. And yeah, I mean it's been a long journey, but it's been a fun one, and I still enjoy it today.
Yeah, and obviously I only started watching your content recently, but I really do enjoy the content, like the live Q&As especially. They're so interactive with the comments and
Thank you.
people get involved and it's amazing. So when did you first start properly watching wrestling?
Now you're going to reveal my age a little bit here. I'm going to prove that I'm quite old now in comparison. But yeah, I started watching in 1992. So we're coming up to WrestleMania 39 now. So my first show was WrestleMania 8. So it's going back a way. Just to give a bit of towards it as well. Like so for many years, Sky had WWE, and it usually was on Sky Sports, maybe Sky One on the weekends and stuff. But on this particular show, WrestleMania 8 was advertised on Sky Movies, and we were watching like the movie, like with my mum and dad or whatever. And I just said, "Oh, this sounds interesting. Can I watch that?" And they kind of went, "Yeah, you can watch it," but it was like getting past the bedtime, so I recorded it, watched it the next day. And then before you know it, yeah, we're 30 something plus years later, and I'm still here. So yeah, it's it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, and did you have who was your favourite wrestler growing up? So,
So to begin with, I had like three favorite wrestlers. I was a big fan of Bret Hart. I used to love I was never a fan of like the Hogans. Like that never worked for me. Like the main eventer, you knew the guy that was going in at the end of the show, gonna win the match. That didn't work for me. I was always like that IC title kind of guy. I liked the mid card. I looked looking at like this is who you can get behind, and this is who you think can get to the top eventually. So Bret Hart was one that stood out at the start. Shawn Michaels being another one. Shawn was in the first match I ever watched, so I mean it's not a bad way to start. And funnily enough, there was a guy called Tatanka who was undefeated for like a year and a half, and it looked like he was going to do good things, but sadly he fell by the wayside.
and obviously wrestling's changed so much over the years. I mean, I grew up with James Ellsworth, so I had a great wrestling period. Was there any points where you were watching wrestling, you were sort of doubting watching it anymore?
Yeah, there's been a few times. I think For someone that would be that through the time period of when I started, 93 to 95 is a hard slog. If you ever want to go and do some retro watching, be prepared. It's quite bad in that period. Like you said, it's so different from then to now. You went through like an era of like the jobs. You had like a dustman, you had like a hockey player that was bad, you had like all these different things that just wasn't good entertainment at the time. It needed a politely kick up the backside to get it into motion, which thankfully WCW, ECW gave it back in the day to bring it to the 18 to 34 demographic that we got, which was the Attitude Era. The next period for me that I probably fell a little bit out of love with it was probably around, I want to say around late 2004. I had like a brief kind of disconnect with the product a little bit, but I stuck around with it. Same in like a couple of periods like 2006, 2010, but I kind of stuck around. Particularly 2010 was one of the big ones until they did the famous CM Punk pipe bomb. That was a really good period. And probably the most recent one, which then goes more into your time frame, would be late 2018. Yeah, we had Becky Lynch and the Man stuff, which was really good going on. But on the other side on Raw, we had that horrible stable that I think featured, was it Braun Strowman, like Baron Corbin, Drew McIntyre, or Dolph Ziggler? It was a combination of three of them was in there. And it was god awful TV each and every week. And I think actually it was Corbin, it was the GM, and it was Drew, Dolph, and Braun. But yeah, that was a quite tough period. But yeah, there's been a few times, but I think I'm a wrestling fan through and through. It's kind of like, obviously I've seen you do a lot of football related content on your channel, soccer if you want, for American viewers. But yeah, for us, obviously, I'm a West Ham fan, so I go through good and bad spells all the time, more bad than good. So I'm used to sticking and grinding out. So yeah, even with pro wrestling, it doesn't change.
Yeah, I'm a Sunderland fan. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but
Yeah,
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 they go through some tough spells as well. But
yeah.
what did you have? Have you got any like favorite matches of yours? There's a one that stood out to you, and like when you were growing up.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, obviously, the biggest recommendation I can give for me is the end of an era match in 2012. Was the Undertaker versus Triple H inside Hell in a Cell. Shawn Michaels was referee. The idea was, I think, it was supposed to be all their last WrestleMania, but it was a culmination of a storyline that had gone over 4 WrestleManias with the Undertaker. The streak, obviously, being the biggest thing at the time in wrestling. The idea of Shawn Michaels had been retired. Triple H wanted to get the revenge for Shawn. Shawn then going to call it down the middle after WrestleMania 27 with the sort of Taker getting the win over Triple H, but obviously it looked like that was the one that Taker struggled the most with to get the win. There's a moment in the match with for me, I'm all about the drama and the storytelling, particularly where Shawn kind of breaks that, where he's not impartial and he takes Triple H's side. He's switching musics, The Undertaker. Taker goes into a pedigree, and you think that's the moment it's going to finish. You just see the 2 count hit, and the Undertaker just kicks out before 3, and just the whole crowd erupts. Shawn goes into the corner. It's just that idea of like, theatre, the drama, the spectacle, storytelling. The match quality is good as well, but with the stakes being on the line as well, like we said with the Undertaker's streak, there was just so much magic in the air. So for me, that's my favorite match of all time. It's always one I would point out and say, go and watch that. Obviously, if you have the substance, it adds to the drama more. But Hell in a Cell has always been one that's been special to me. Undertaker, Mankind, King of the Ring, 1998. Mankind being thrown off of the Hell in a Cell, which, at the time, being, I think I was like 14. You can't help but feel like there's a sense of feel of realism when you
Yeah,
see someone fly that far down to go through a table. I know there's protection in this, but there didn't look much protection in that match. It just looked gruesome. And TLC 2 from WrestleMania 17 as well. Hardy Boys, Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, tables, ladders, and chairs. For me, is absolute spectacle on that show. It's one of my favorites. I like to go back and watch regularly.
yeah. Actually, the Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Undertaker was probably one of the first sort of retro matches I watched in terms of gone back. It's
Mm.
sort of, you just type in WWE in your YouTube feed, go through some videos, and you end up at that match. But obviously, wrestling now we've got Triple H sort of under control. I just do think it was time that Vince sort of left and Triple H sort of took his shoes and took over creative, I guess.
I think so. Look, Vince obviously is Vince. He has the vision of how wrestling should be and what worked so successfully in the 80s, obviously with the birth of WrestleMania, Hulkamania, the golden era. He went through a bit of a weird period through the 90s, but I mentioned earlier about one of the bad periods of the 90s. There was a steroids trial at the time in 1994 where, that could have put Vince away, and he won that trial. Obviously, the comeback then was to evolve the product after that. Vince obviously was a big part of the Attitude Era, ruthless aggression, some of the biggest times in wrestling, even in the PG era. People knock it. There's been good times as well as bad times. Like you said, you've been a fan, for the James Ellsworth days. 2016 was a great year of professional wrestling. Some great times. 2017 as well. But it gets to a point where I think with Vince, the ideas, he still has little tweaks of ideas that work if you believe inside sources. For example, with Seth Rollins' theme music, he added the idea of the burn it down, which worked really well. Everyone sings along to it. It's just that little touch that adds something more to a layer of, entrance, of presentation, and the character. But then when you look at like the current storytelling we were getting in WWE over the last, I mean, I go back to 2018, sort of 4 or 5 years. There's been a lot of repetition of rematches on Raw, what I would call more lazy booking these days compared to what we've seen. We've seen a freshness since Triple H has come in. We've all seen like the ideas of how NXT, the takeovers were so special when it was Triple H's baby. Now Triple H has had that since coming up to Raw and SmackDown. Has everything been perfect? Of course not. But do you know what? There's a new sense of excitement amongst wrestling fans as well. I think they were ready for a change. And I think change can be a good thing. Again, we make reference to football clubs. A minute ago there, I said of going through the grind sometimes. But sometimes if things aren't going well for your football club, you change your manager. And once you change your manager, you might get a new style of play, new ideas on the pitch, new things that make things tweak and make things a better product and gets better results. And this, I think, has come with Triple H because you look at the success of Clash of the Castle, fantastic show. The return of Bray Wyatt, the Extreme Rules show was fantastic. Let's not mention the rest. Survivor Series War Games being brought in, I thought was really, really cool. I think the Rumble this year was a great show. Elimination Chamber with Sami Zayn, the whole Bloodline story, how that's been taken off the ground since August has been, I think, one of the best storylines in wrestling ever. I mean, that goes up there with some of the top ones that go in the classics for people. So there's been some really good things. There's been a couple of things. Well, I mentioned Bray Wyatt. That storyline's not really worked for me. But you're going to get good and bad with everything that goes through wrestling. They can't be 100% perfect. But was it time for the change? Absolutely, yes, it was.
Yeah, and I sort of want to touch on the bloodline stuff because I sort of have a theory coming up to WrestleMania. So the
Let's get
question
it.
that I'm asking is, do you think Roman will lose the belts? And my theory is that he won't lose the belts, but the Usos will lose to KO and Sammy. And Jay sort of turns his back on the bloodline, and then we get Roman versus Jay at SummerSlam. I think that's how I would like it to work out. But what
I
would you
love
think?
the idea of the storyline. I think that certainly, if you look at the current direction of the storytelling with Jey Uso, obviously from the Royal Rumble particularly, and I love actually this is a perfect time we're talking about it actually as well because that's when Sammy decided to use the steel chair on Roman Reigns, led to that story that went through Elimination Chamber. Jey Uso walked out, didn't he, at the time? We didn't know what his future was going to be. He's now come back. Obviously, Sammy said to him, "You've got your way out if you want it." He decided no, he's gonna super kick Sami Zayn. But of course, at the time he did that, was he doing it for Roman the Bloodline, or was he doing it for Jimmy Uso? Jimmy had been threatened if Jay wasn't brought back, that Jimmy was going to be the one that took the hit. Jay had already shown he had his brothers back, coming for a tag team championship match on a random SmackDown, I'm going to say, because the dates escapes my head. But against Ricochet and Braun Strowman to retain those championships. Jay has Jimmy's back. So I'm in agreement with you. When you look at this past week on SmackDown, Sami Zayn more or less said, look, you might be annoyed for me for what I did and being selfish, but I wasn't going to put up with the stuff that you've put up with. And the idea of saying that the reason you're annoyed is because I did it first, not because you did it. It was me who did it, and you wish it was you. I like the element of the storytelling. This is where I think you're correct, because I believe in my head, definitely the Usos will drop their championships. Roman, like you said, that one is interesting. It's 50-50 because he's so close to 1,000 days as champion. Did you want to drop it now at the last hurdle? But then Cody's storyline, it needs to culminate with a WrestleMania win. Do you really want to wait another 12 months for it? Sometimes when these things don't click, Cody would have to go heel if it carries on in the same vein for 12 months. Things get dragged out. So I'm at the moment, I'm in the camp of Cody winning. I think it feels like it could be the right time to freshen things up. And what better way to freshen things up after WrestleMania than what you suggested there? If Jay turns on the bloodline or the bloodline turns on Roman, for example, it's Jay, because Jay's been with Jimmy, he's been with Solo. If those guys continue, the three Usos take out Roman Reigns. Roman's a part-timer now. You can build that for SummerSlam. And then what a perfect circle where the head of the table storyline started with Roman and Jey Uso, Clash of the Champions 2020, to culminate 3 years later, SummerSlam 2023, Jey Uso picking up the win over Roman Reigns. I mean, Robbie, it's a superb idea. I think for me, it ticks a lot of the boxes. And I think a lot of fans would be happy to see it as well because you're actively building a new star. Jay's character work has been unbelievable in that time frame. If you look at the start of the start of the Bloodline story and where Jay is now, Jay really is main event Jay. He's ready for that top spot. So I love the storyline idea.
Yeah, I think it would probably be a perfect ending to the sort of bloodline stuff. Obviously, you could go back to it more in the future if you really wanted to.
Absolutely.
You can make another bloodline, but no, I think Jay is ready for that sort of push. And another person I want to touch on as well is Montez Ford. And I've been wanting the idea of a Montez Ford solo done for so long. And do you think he's ready?
He's definitely ready. I think he's been ready for a while, to be honest. What I've liked about where they've stuck together is I feel now Angelo Dawkins is now ready as well. I think that's where the difference was. If you'd have asked me, I don't know, 6 to 12 months ago, you break up the Street Profits, what happens? I would have said Montez Ford goes on to be at least a mid-card champion, maybe towards a world champion. He's got that charisma, isn't he? He's oozing it. He's ready to go for big things. But Angelo I thought was going to get lost. I don't feel the same way now. I think Angelo has really stepped up in the last sort of 12 months and hearing the rumors online of being the Genetti, which is quite a common phrase being used in tag team wrestling right now, especially with Toxic Attraction. But at the same time, you asked about Montez Ford, and I think Montez Ford would definitely be a success. They teased it, Elimination Chamber, the idea of him being in the Chamber match. He had a beautiful spot in there with the Chamber where he was kind of doing that sort of somersault flip off the top of the cell. I mean, nothing I'd ever do. But at the same time, you look and see now Austin Theory has confronted both Dawkins and Ford. I believe it was just this past week on Raw. It all rolls into one wrestling these days. But Theory more or less said that Dawkins was the star of that team. That Montez Ford gets the opportunities and he always chokes. I think that's the tease of the start of something. Montez Ford, I think, will be a solo act in at least 3 months' time from now. The question is how he does it. Do they do it where Montez is jealous of the idea that Angelo is the star, not him, and he turns to Angelo and becomes a heel? Or do they actually just go their own path through a draft? There's different ways and twists and turns it can happen. Some people I speak to want that New Day feeling where it's kind of like they never break up, but they go and do their own thing. Biggie became a world champion. Kofi did it, for example, and Xavier Woods became King of the Ring. So that would be nice in one way, but in another way, how cool would it be to see Angelo versus Montez? I think it could be quite an interesting matchup as well. Where do you stand on it?
I think we should see Montez versus Angelo. I think I like the idea of going that route where Montez is sort of picks out of jealousy and maybe it gets into an argument with Angelo and it just sort of kicks off for there. I
Mm,
feel like that should be the way to go. But
I'd like that.
obviously with the fresh talent in WWE, there's probably a lot of it now due to NXT and all these different indie shows. I want to touch on LA Knight because he sort of came, I mean, not from nowhere, but he's grown a lot. So what would you like to see happen with LA Knight?
I want to see him towards the main event as quick as possible. But I mean, of course, you have to organically get there. What I like about LA Knight since he's come in, he's shown how good he is on the mic. I've been a fan of his for a long time. His mic work through Impact Wrestling, NWA was another level. And Impact, when he saw him as a heel, NWA he kind of went on towards the babyface run, and he's not done that with WWE so much as of yet. Had a brief spell in NXT, but not to the level he's capable of. LA Knight could be this next Rock, could be next Austin with the vocal game. In ring, it's not his strongest suit, but I want to see him do very, very well. He's shared the spotlight so far with the likes of Bray Wyatt, a former world champion. He's been in a segment with The Undertaker. That's credit in itself. He's now been involved with Rey Mysterio this past week on SmackDown. He's going with like lots of different legends. And there has been the teasers of the idea of WrestleMania, Stone Cold Steve Austin used in some capacity. I mentioned about it on my channel the other day, so if you don't mind if I repeat myself here, but the idea of LA Knight coming out and saying, an LA WrestleMania needs LA Knight, just like the let me talk to you. And you just get the glass shatter, like, because he wants someone to come down and confront him. Austin's that person to come and do it. You can get the confrontations of the what, and you get that, yeah, you just get those back and forth between the two. You can sort of have the idea of where, Steve Austin does what Steve Austin does, where he kind of false sense of security says, okay, I've come out and answered your challenge sort of thing, but you've got guts. I think you're going to go far. Quite like, how about instead of a match, we have a beer instead, sort of thing. And then they do the classic where Steve Austin does the beers, then does the stunner. Everybody's happy. Austin goes into the sunset because it's a big moment for LA Knight, something like that at WrestleMania. And so far with LA Knight, which has been nice as well, he hasn't had to win anything with the legends. He just gets over sharing the spotlight with them. He's so new and fresh. So for me, he's got everything of the tools in the locker to get there. They're actually doing the right things to get him there. I think after WrestleMania is when they need to start making that push happen. A King in the Ring, a Money in the Bank, maybe even a Royal Rumble contender next year. Just get him some wind under his belt. His mic game is strong enough, so I think he will succeed.
Yeah, the King of the Ring, it's such an interesting one because I think there's so many people that could win it now. Like, there's a lot of talent in there that I think could definitely go and win it. So it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. But I want to touch on the Judgment Day so much because
Nice.
I'm not a fan at all of
Okay.
Dominic. Since
Yes.
Dominic came to WWE, first of all, I wasn't a fan. I think he's developed a lot, but I think he's so repetitive. And I said this, I think I said it to Kyle. I don't think he's needed in the Judgment Day, which I think a lot of people disagree with. I think Judgment Day could be fine without Dominic, but I think he's just there.
I think it's a fair argument you make. The first thing that I would take from it, does Judgment Day need Dominic? No, no, they don't. I mean, like you said there, you look at the other members, Finn Balor, Finn Balor, former Universal Champion, he's doing great things as well. I mean, he's going to be in Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania against Edge. Rhea Ripley is arguably going to main event night one potentially of WrestleMania, so she's doing perfectly fine. Damian Priest, he's a good hand in that group as well. I mean, I think he'd be perfectly fine. The Puerto Rico show at Backlash, I expect him to have a big role on that show. That will be his WrestleMania. But with Dominic, I would slightly say that I wouldn't say I would disagree, but what I'd say is that I wasn't overly a fan when he came in either. I thought his first match with Seth Rollins was fine for someone that was so new to the game. So I thought the match was fine. But I thought the character work was lacking a bit. What I would say that's come from since joining Judgment Day, he's surrounded with, like we mentioned that those names, Ripley, Balor, Priest. He's learning so much. I mean, Balor's been a teacher. He helped teach Becky Lynch, for example, to where she is now. It can't hurt to have that training from those people and being surrounded. And I will say that where I would agree there is some repetitiveness with Dominic, obviously, especially the last three promos with Ray, kind of saying about the deadbeat dad stuff. We've seen it. We need to get to the next part of that chat. What is Dom gonna do to get Ray to accept that match? He needs to do that dastardly thing of whatever it's going to be to make Ray accept it. But what I will say is in positive with Dominic and what I've really liked, I feel that his confidence has really grown with Judgment Day. He feels much more comfortable as a heel, much more comfortable as a stable member. The fact that he can play off the Eddie stuff as well, saying, I should have been Eddie's son. It draws a lot of heat from people. The fact he does the Three Amigos, he knows people hate it, and he's lapping up, he's enjoying it to the point as well where he was getting some what chants on Raw this past week. I believe it was Raw, maybe SmackDown, one or the other. And I thought myself, this is usually where people crumble. And he didn't crumble. He kind of took it, soaked it, and he carried on his promo. That's a sign of, for me, that someone is improving, developing, and is on his way. Does Judgment Day need him? No. But does he need Judgment Day? At this moment, yes. Because I think it's helping him. And I think that if he gets the heat that he is hoping to achieve by beating Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania, then I think he's got a good future ahead of him. But I think the big question I would have, where I think then it goes back onto your side of the argument again, is what happens when Dominic ends up on his own? Does he succeed? Has he got enough to, on him right now? Because he's got Rhea protecting him. He's protecting Rhea. He's got those elements that can help him get through matches and get through segments week to week. What happens when he's on his own? And especially if there's a retirement stipulation for Rey. What happens if Rey Mysterio is not around either? Those are the things where Dominic's really going to be tested.
Yeah, and I think we'll find that out soon enough because I don't see Ray probably lasting much longer, like week in, week out and wrestling after Mania.
Mm.
I think it depends on who wins the match, maybe. Depends on where he's going to go, but it'll be an interesting one. Obviously, you're touching Rhea, so I sort of want to get into the women's wrestling because
Yeah.
it's grown again so much over the years, and I sort of want to touch on Roxanne Perez a bit because obviously, she's vacant, vacant the title, like give it up. So, where do you think she's going to go? Do you think it's going to be a case of she turns up maybe at the ladder match and sort of says, wait, hang on, I'm fighting for my title here? Or do you think they give her that main roster push?
They've left it open, haven't they? They've really left
Yeah.
it open. I think the way they've done it, Shawn Michaels obviously the booker for NXT. He's taken one of his old storylines. He did the same thing where he collapsed in the ring after a match on Raw back in the mid-90s. So they've done this before, and a lot of people really was like, "Is this real? Is this not? What happened here?" I mean, Shawn sold it so well back in the day as well. I remember being young, going, "What happened there? Like, is he all right?" But like you said, these days they vacated arguably vacated the title for this ladder match, and they said, should we need to for Stand and Deliver? So it's like, well, what are the plans after WrestleMania? Is there a spot for her on Raw or SmackDown? She's good enough. Like Roxanne Perez is the future. I mean, she's unbelievable in the ring. She was amazing in the Rumble. She did it for like 5, 6 minutes, but she was unbelievable. One of, if not already in the top 10 of the women's division of the entire WWE. And that's saying so with the talent pool they've got. If they have not got a spot for on Raw or SmackDown yet, because I think she should be a big deal and not lost in the shuffle, then they've got that window to let her back into Stand and Deliver, either win the championship back or not win the ladder match and chase the person who wins it, say a Tiffany Stratton, say whoever else is in the Gigi Dolan, Zoe Stark, I believe are the two confirmed at the moment. So yeah, it's an exciting time. She's got a very bright future, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go for her.
Yeah, and another one who probably has a very bright future as well is I actually bring it on your Q&A show, Cora Jade, one of
Oh
Roxanne's
yes.
old friends. I think the sky's the limit for Cora.
Mm.
Weirdly enough, I preferred her as a babyface, which I mean, I like her heel. I think she plays a heel perfectly. But that when I first started sort of watching NXT again, it was babyface Cora who was running the place. So I sort of agree on that. But no, I think the sky's the limit for Cora. I don't know if you agree. I also don't like the idea of her joining. What's the name again? I forgot. Bailey Damage Control. I also
Yeah.
don't like the idea of her joining Damage Control. I think that would be perfect for her. She sort of fits the role perfectly for me.
I think it would be a very good idea for the stablemates. Obviously, Damage Control to have another upstart from NXT. Like you said, Cora Jade's got another one, a very bright future. If it's a big if the Raw Women's Championship is still Bianca Belair after WrestleMania, I would not be surprised if Cora Jade was the first challenger on a call up. She's been missing from NXT for what feels like a long time now. I want to say since the turn of the year, I don't think we've seen Cora Jade. I feel like the deadline was the last time, but still, she's not been around for a long time. A call up is in her future. I think she's meant to be dating Bron Breakker, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Instagram only tells you so much. But if Bron is on the rise and going to go to a Raw SmackDown, they usually keep the couples together. I think Cora will be joining, and she's ready. But I will say I agree with you. I actually prefer as a babyface, particularly the War Games match where she sold the injury to her arm. For me, that was one of my favorite War Games matches since they brought it back, and she was the main story, the main catalyst of that with the arm injury, selling it, the babyface natural reaction. So I'd like to see that Cora come back. But obviously, they've tried to evolve it now into the Mean Girl Cora, which I'm still adjusting to. She does do the heel stuff well, but yeah, I'm on your side. I prefer the Skater Girl.
Yeah, and so I want to touch on two last things. So first off, what do you think of Pete Dunne potentially coming back as a character in the whole sort of stomping about stuff? I honestly love it. I thought Pete Dunne was so much better, and I can't wait to see him again.
He's an absolute legend, obviously with the UK scene, and he did so well under the WWE NXT UK banner. Pete Dunne, NXT did well as well. It's a shame he was never the champion for that brand, but he had the potential certainly. He has he's done something that a lot of people have not been able to do. Sometimes he got saddled with a god awful name in Butch. It's not the first Butch we've had in WWE, but certainly this one felt like it was doomed for failure. Just as a peaky blinder, it didn't do it like it was going to go well for him at the start, but he maximized his minutes as Butch, and he actually made me grow into a fan of the idea of what Butch was. But to turn around and say, like, do you want Butch or do you want Pete Dunne? There's no argument. Pete Dunne coming back is just the guy is just absolutely superb. He's a warrior. He's a great technician in the ring as well. hopefully still have some of the traits of what got Butch over with the crowd, because I don't want him to lose what gave that personality with the mainstream audience. But certainly, if you can combine the best bits of both and have it as Pete Dunne, God, his future's bright.
100%. And last sort of thing I want to touch on is Logan Paul going up against Seth Rollins, because there's a lot of people dislike Logan and a lot of people like Logan.
Mm,
Personally, I'm a big fan, like not just with the wrestling stuff, because people can't disagree that he's built for wrestling. He's so
mm.
natural in the ring. But I actually like just the idea of Logan Paul being in and around wrestling, and he's obviously got someone so big as Seth Rollins to build off of, and I feel like the future's really bright for Logan Paul and wrestling. I don't know, do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think that he's got a very bright future. I must admit, I was not familiar with Logan Paul before. Was it WrestleMania 37? He was involved with Sammy and KO. That was the first time he came in. I know that came with a lot of backlash, and he still gets booed for whatever whatever's done before wrestling. I don't follow it, and for me, I'm not interested in what he does before wrestling. What I'm aware of is, as a wrestling fan, this guy has a very popular social media following. He's done very well outside with his YouTube channel, The Impulsive. I actually watched the Mayweather fight based off of what I saw at WrestleMania 37. And it was, he lasted in the ring with Mayweather, whatever anybody says. And it's led to what we've seen now in the ring. And for me personally, I look at it and I say, um, he had an unbelievable match with Roman. He did great with the Miz at SummerSlam. The WrestleMania match, blew expectations. You mentioned Seth Rollins, now arguably one of the best workers in wrestling right now, and unbelievable potential this match has got at WrestleMania. The fact when they started building this at the Rumble, my first thought was, yes, that's a match I'd like to see at WrestleMania, especially if you needed reminding. Logan Paul just done that amazing spot with Ricochet in the Rumble like seconds before. So, I mean, for me, I'm excited to see what that brings to the table. Logan Paul is going to bring eyes in each and every time, potentially new eyes to a WWE product, and that can only be good for wrestling fans, because wrestling, everyone wants it back to the mainstream of the 90s, early 2000s, and the only way it's going to get there is through celebrity. It was Mike Tyson that helped do it before, and some of the big celebrities they brought in back in the day to do it these days. We're getting the Bad Bunnies in, which is great. We're getting the Logan Pauls in. This is good. Pat McAfee obviously is very popular on YouTube as well. So yeah, I mean, for me, it says good things for the wrestling product, and Logan Paul was certainly, from an in-ring perspective, he's impressed.
Yeah, but thank you so much for joining me, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to be on, Robbie. Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully we can collaborate again sometime in the future. Be awesome.
Yeah, and where can people find your channel, your Twitter, everything like
So on YouTube, it's SCW The Wrestling Channel. Yeah, I'm just basically a guy that chats wrestling all the time. If you're into WWE, AEW, Impact, then yeah, it's a place to come out and just get interactive as well. I do a lot of Q&As, as Robbie mentioned earlier on, predictions, reviews, sometimes just specialist topics as well. You can follow me on Twitter as well with at SCW The Wrestling Channel to find, but also the username at SCW_Steve. And also, you can follow me on Instagram, just SCW The Wrestling Channel. So yeah, that's pretty much the three main places you can find me.
I'll link them all down below anyway. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.